introduce our next panelist, the business of racing. And for the business of racing, I asked this next panelist, who many of you all know, pretty famous woman here. I asked her, what's one thing that you want this audience to know that they may not know? And she wrote me this email, and it said, I don't live in Boston anymore. I'm back in Charlotte. Danielle Trotta from SiriusXM.
Thank you. Is my microphone on? We good? Yeah, I get that question a lot. Moved back during COVID, so home sweet home, and it is a true honor to be here. I'm excited to talk about the business side of racing, a peek behind the curtain with three of our great team presidents at the Cup Series level. Thank you. Torrey Galida, president of Richard Childress Racing. Steve Lauletta, team president for 2311 Racing.
Thank you.
Who I hear is going to be my problem child today. I was told that by Steve Newmark, team president.
I'm already mad because Torrey didn't bring Steve or I water. He only brought you water.
Thank you, Torrey.
Pleasure.
Butter me up to start. The shoe game is strong. I knew you'd be rocking Jordans today. It's a good problem to have when your boss owns a shoe company.
Job security.
Yeah.
My boss would remind me.
I think each of the Cup Series teams operates in their own kind of unique and individual way. So thank you in advance for your candor and your openness and your transparency. On the business side of racing and the team president role, everything comes across your desk, right? I wanted to start with you, Torrey, and we can work our way around. I love a quote from the late Kobe Bryant. He said, once you show your team that there's no task too small, no job too insignificant, you can demonstrate to do the managerial tasks, but also the entry-level ones. So what is one role that you're responsible for as team president that people might be surprised about?
Well, first of all, Danielle, when I heard Heather Gibbs up here talking about all the fires that happen every day, I kind of chuckled to myself because we're the firefighters on a regular basis. So, yeah, we do a whole variety of different things. I don't have a great story about how I sweep the shop floor every Friday afternoon, but one of the things that I do handle that I thought was an incredible waste of time, the first time I was told it was my responsibility, is personally signing all the checks to all of our vendors. So it's something we do every 2 weeks, and we still send out paper checks to all the vendors. And I thought, man, why am I doing this? But it's a really great discipline. So it's something that Richard and his wife Judy still insist on because they want to see where the money's going. And so when you sit there and you sign that stack of checks and you look through it, some are easy, right? It's Goodyear, and some are not so easy. And so when you see one and you say, I've never seen this before, where'd it come from? And you ask questions, then sometimes you find out some really interesting things about where the money is being spent. And racers by nature are hoarders, so you cannot have too many sets of brake pads or brake calipers on the shelf. It doesn't matter. So you will occasionally find times when you can spot a problem and fix it, sometimes before it's too late.
Steve?
I give a kick-ass hauler tour at the racetrack. You know, I've been around this in various forms. You know, work for an agency and work for a brand at Miller Brewing Company. So, you know, back to my days of hanging banners in a hospitality area at 4 a.m. at Daytona, I try to tell everybody on our team, you know, like I've done everything you guys are doing, and I'm happy to do it again. So please ask. So, you know, sometimes they do ask me to give our partners hauler tours or something along those lines, and it's great to do. But, you know, as long as everybody realizes that we're there to help and not just stand around and either at the shop or at the racetrack, hopefully it sets a culture that everybody helps in and helps everybody.
Yeah, so important.
Yeah, I think the question's an interesting one because usually when we speak to an audience, we don't have a couple hundred fact checkers who can actually call out whether we're telling the truth or not. But with the audience here, I think that, you know, everybody's familiar that our sports is kind of an all hands on deck approach. And I think if you compare us to some of the other professional leagues, they've got massive staffs. That's just not the way it works in NASCAR. So we're in the customer service business. When you go to the track, it's whatever it takes. And you see that mentality across all the race teams. So if you're standing on pit road and the hospitality folks and the PR folks are otherwise occupied and they're fans or guests who need pictures with the driver, you become a photographer. If you're in Charlotte and you have a prospect coming in, partner coming in, you become a chauffeur. And I think that, one of the things that we talk about at RFK is the kind of have intentional, unstructured nature of how we do things. And it kind of what that means is that everybody should be willing to do anything and to chip in at any time. And that should go for my role or any other role. And we see a lot of examples of that. This past weekend, we had quite a number of guests. And so we brought in, the gentleman who runs our museum and store, and he was given garage tours. We had the woman who prepares our decks on the sales side, setting up hospitality. And that's just, I think, a mentality that you see in the sport across the board and that everybody prides themselves on, is that if there's something that needs to be done, you need to raise your hand and do it.
Let's talk optimism in our sport right now and where we are in the present moment with the NASCAR Cup Series. Torrey, what is something that gives you a lot of optimism as where we are as an industry?
I think one of the things that's really important, and it's one of the things that we've really been working on for the last probably 10 years at least, and that's increasing the diversity of our fan base and the average age of our fan base, trying to attract younger fans. And it's something that in the last couple of years we've really made a lot of progress in. So 57% of our new fans now are between 18 and 34. So that's fantastic. It's great. And you see it at the racetrack. You see that there's more young people there. There's people with their friends really enjoying the race and having a good time. You see them camping. And so that's really a good thing. And we've seen similar progress with diversity as well. So about 27% of new fans are Hispanic, and about 18% of new fans are African American. So those fans who have become a fan within the last 3 years. So I think that's something that that's a race that we don't ever declare victory on. We continue, but it really is great, because I think 10 years ago, 5 years ago, we a lot of times we're wringing our hands that every year our fan base got a year older. So it's really great to see those younger fans coming into the sport.
Yeah, and I think one of your drivers, Bubba Wallace, has spoken publicly about that too. Steve, from your standpoint, could be a similar answer or different, but something that gives you a great sense of optimism.
I think the sport's in a much better place in terms of people thinking differently and taking chances and being innovative and moving quicker. When I worked for the previous race team that I did at Chip Ganassi and left in 2018, one of the reasons why I left was my frustration with not the team itself, because I loved working at that team, but just the series and the industry and the fact that we were continuing to do the same stuff over and over again. And now you see a lot of, and I applaud NASCAR for this, a lot of changes and risk-taking that some of it works and some of it doesn't work, whether it's the dirt race in Bristol or the street race in Chicago, schedule changes, next-gen car, new fans, and trying to attract things. We do Bubba's Block Party in coordination with NASCAR. I think that's what you have to do in such a fast-paced environment that we all live in, whether it's just sports, marketing, and business in general, or this business. And so being able to take risks, being able to test and learn, and kind of get rid of the stuff that doesn't work quickly, and then focus on new ideas, to me is a place that this sport is in that it hadn't been in over the last few decades for me.
Yeah, and I think Ben Kennedy gets a lot of credit for that and evolving the schedule as we've seen the last few years. Steve, how would you answer that same question?
I think it's a similar theme, is that, the biggest thing that we have right now is a really positive narrative about the sport and its upward trajectory, and that captures some of the things that Torrey and Steve said, and it's a lot of credit goes to NASCAR for being aggressive and trying to be nimble, and Ben with the schedule and, all the different components, whether it's sports betting, esports. But I think one thing that sometimes gets forgotten or neglected to be mentioned when we talk about this positive sentiment is the product on the track is as good as it's ever been. And so if you look at the actual racing, the number of passes, the number of new winners, the parity out there that anybody can win on any given day, I think that really has allowed and facilitated all this other stuff that's going on. And I know we compare ourselves to other motorsports, and you see an upward trend for a lot of motorsports, which is actually a good thing for us. But even with that, I would take the number of passes and the excitement in our racing compared to any other form of motorsports out there.
Yeah, Riley Herbst had an impressive 15-second
Right.
advantage win in the Xfinity Series. I'm not sure we'll ever see that in the Cup Series because it is tighter than ever. Steve Newmark told me that I may be able to needle you a little bit or find a pet peeve in asking you about how you determine the cost per race or how that could fluctuate.
No, you're right, Newmark knows. That is the one thing, when people talk about per race cost, it is the one thing that makes my blood boil, because it just is destroying the value of the sport. So anybody in here that happens to work for a race team, that talks to people and ever uses the word per race cost, I have one simple request: stop. Because you're just devaluing, it becomes pork bellies. Partners are gonna look for the most of the races for the cheapest amount of money. And we're doing it to ourselves. And we just have to stop doing that. So I've had major companies call and say, what's your per race cost? I go, I don't talk that way. I'll never give you a per race cost. I'll give you what everything that we present you, in my mind, has a value, and I'll give you that number. And they're like, oh, so everything is individualized. I go, yeah. And they go, look forward to seeing that. I go, no, I'm not giving that to you. You do that work. And if I tell you it's $1 million and you think it's worth 100 grand, let's have that conversation. But if you price things as a per race, that means that everything you do, if sponsor X is on your car this weekend and they don't come on for another 3 races, and you send a social post out on Wednesday, is that free? Because it wasn't in the race weekend cost. So it just doesn't make sense. And everybody that I tell that on the brand side, why I won't give them a per race cost, they go, wow, that makes all the sense in the world. So they're smart enough to figure it out. And if we could get smart enough to stop talking that way, it will help the entire industry.
And I don't have as much anger as
Off
Steve
my
does about it,
soapbox.
but we preach the same thing, because if you step back, and our sport is unique in what we can offer our partners compared, and it's easy for me to compare it to other teams under our umbrella, the Penguins or the Red Sox. They sell signage in a stadium, they can sell tickets, but they can't sell access to drivers. They can't sell a full program that can be anywhere geographically in the country. And so we're not selling races, you're selling a platform. You're selling activation programs. And that's what we should be talking about, because it is a full year. You don't go to the Panthers and say, I want to sponsor you for three games. You have a season-long sponsorship and you get everything that comes with it. And I think when you're comparing apples to apples, we feel that we can offer more than a lot of other sports just because of the rights that we have, and quite frankly, the restrictions that NASCAR doesn't have that other big professional sports have.
And there'll still be variety in the market, right? They'll have what we put together as a package versus what these two is going to have a different price tag. So that's good. Brands should still talk to multiple teams and still figure it out. But when they say, well, you're at 200 and you're at 50 and you're at 400, well, I'm going to go over, like, it just kills us.
So that's such a mind shift, I think, for teams that are operating that way. So what would you say the first step would be as a philosophy change? How do you start to implement that?
Well, I think you got to value yourself, everything you bring to the table. It's not about the cost per race, because, hey, there's a lot of money out there that has that many races linked to it. 0.
Steve Newmark, our sport is in the midst of renewing the charter agreement. Negotiations are ongoing with a new TV rights deal. How would you characterize the status of those negotiations?
I think I'd like to dance around the question, but I think it probably, with this group, there's probably no secrets. And I think that it's fair to say that if you look at the progress we've made, it's probably a lot slower than any of us would have liked. We started about 18 months ago with kind of representatives from both NASCAR and the teams. Great group: Steve Phelps, Steve O'Donnell, Ben Kennedy, Scott Prime, and then on the team side, Dave Alpern, Curtis Polk, Jeff Gordon, and myself. And not through lack of time or effort put into it, but I don't think we've moved the needle like any of us would have liked. And it's one of those things that they're difficult, complicated issues, but we had hoped that we might have arrived at somewhere that was, we had more progress. And that really hits me when we have to report back to the team and the team owners, and we kind of talk about where we are. And I think a lot of it, you kind of get these stares like, what have you guys been doing for the last 18 months? But I mean, I think we're still hopeful and optimistic that we'll be able to put something together, because I think what's really important from the team perspective, and I think for the sports perspective, is that we implement a new paradigm for how we operate. You heard a lot about our challenges. I know NASCAR, the tracks have some of their own challenges too, and what we've really tried to approach it by saying, let's relook at how this sport is structured, and let's look at how we collaborate. You have all of these stakeholders, and we need healthy stakeholders all across the board. You need it at the league level, you need it at the venue level, the team level, and the driver level. So how can we do that differently than maybe we've done it in the past? Because the world has evolved. You know, the challenges we face now are different than the challenges we faced 30 years ago. And I think you heard on the first panel, I mean, one of the key points for the teams is having some longevity around our charter. And that's important because that encourages you to invest. I look at, again, using the Red Sox as an example, there are years that probably MLB teams have lost a lot of money, but their owners justified it because the franchise value kept growing exponentially. And I think if we can get a system where everybody's aligned, you can grow the driver star power, you can be collaborating on everything. And quite frankly, there are times that we're competing. I mean, with the sponsorship model, we're out there trying to chase the same dollars sometimes that NASCAR and the tracks are legitimately trying to do for their own P&L and economic model. And so there is a path out there. There is a way for us to re-envision how we operate, but we've got some work to do to get there.
Final question, gentlemen. I recently heard Jeff Gordon say on SiriusXM that how he structures driver contracts in terms of salary and bonuses keeps him up at night sometimes in terms of how to balance it all. Torrey, we'll start with you and go this way. What keeps you up at night as it relates to the job?
It really goes back to a lot of what we've talked about, and it's the business model and the reliance on sponsorship. Also, I think a lot of people who aren't involved in the industry, most people in this room understand it, but we have a really complicated business. And so, you know, basketball team or really any of the stick and ball teams don't have that whole element of building race cars. You know, as long as the ball is inflated to the right pressure and it's a 10-foot high goal, you've done your work in that regard. With us, there's so many other intricacies and so many other complications that the business is very complicated, and trying to understand where you're coming up short is really, really difficult and really challenging, and takes a lot of really smart people to do and a lot of economic resources to do as well. And it's really that piece where I spend the majority of my time, and the majority of my time at night staring at the ceiling is about making sure that we've got the economic resources to make it all work. And it continues to be challenging. There's lots of different places for marketers to spend their money. You know, we're a huge sport and a big niche, but still a niche. So we've got continuing challenges to convince people of the strength and the power of the marketing platform. So that's where I spend a whole lot of my time.
Steve?
Well, for me at 2311, being only in our third season, it's really about how do I make sure I'm helping set the path for this company to be, you know, at the forefront of winning races, contending for championships, delivering value to partners, bringing new fans, becoming more inclusive for the next, you know, 30, 40 years, right? Denny's still driving. He hasn't even got to become like a full-on everyday owner.
Maybe he'll come out of his shell when he does that.
Maybe, yeah, that would be good.
We need him to be more opinionated.
Yeah, that would be good. But I just, you know, we have a lot of people that this is their first job in motorsports. And so how do I make sure that we're building a culture and a company that's going to be here, you know, for the long term and have the right approach to the business, because we're so new. We don't know what we don't know yet, which is kind of fun. That's the reason why I like it as much as I do, because you very rarely get the chance to start from a clean sheet of paper.
So I think I echo the sentiment from Torrey, but then maybe throw something out that may not be as intuitive, is that for me, one of the things that I agonize about and think about quite a bit is how are we making sure we're giving our people the opportunity to grow and advance? And you heard Brad say earlier when somebody asked, I think Abe asked about how the company has been turned around. He gave a lot of credit to the people and probably understated the massive impact that he's had in rejuvenating us on the competition side. But one of the challenges is that we have good people, but we're small, nimble organizations. And so how do you make sure we're taking all the talent and allowing them to grow and get new opportunities? And within your organization, how can you elevate people? How can you give them new opportunities to explore and expand kind of their skill set? Because at the end of the day, employee retention is key to all of our success.
Yeah.
I
it's
brought all
something-
mine here today, and
Oh,
no
you
one's
did?
allowed to talk to them, okay?
Did you
Yeah.
bring the RC wine? That's what everybody wants to know.
No.
From the
We should have
vineyard.
given out shoes and wine.
Yeah.
You guys would,
Jordans and bottles of wine, Steve?
And
Well, come up with, what can we get out of you?
yeah, we're gonna give
Yeah.
RFK hat to
Yeah.
Lauletta.
Did you buy children's wine?
I think it comes as part of the Hall of Fame package.
Excellent.
Cocktail reception to follow. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate everything, the transparency and the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, David.